Okay, this is part two. We're gonna start off where my dad left off. The video on my phone ran out of storage, which is why I haven't been recording. But dad,
Well, as they were rolling her out, one of the officers had informed me that she had been to the hospital once already, and he had talked to me, and he said, if I were you, I would have a autopsy done. And what they had discovered was that she just had a bowel leakage, and with that, they could have, uh, and we discovered later that it was operation could have been performed, and if they had the X-ray, and an operation would have taken um, maybe 5-10 minutes, and she could have been saved. So, in essence, the doctor that took the X-ray was basically at fault because he never showed the X-ray to the doctor that was the primary care that was working with her in that instance, and with the insistence that she was maybe on drugs by the nurses, uh, nurse there, head nurse, the doctor went by that statement, and because of that, my wife um, was poisoned, developed sepsis and gangrene, and that was the cause of her death.
so how did you feel holding mom while she was
I,
passing?
I felt that I didn't know she was passing. I know she was sick, and we had called the hospital, and they had told us that they had her meds, and if we gave her like meds that night, the proper meds they had, we could pick them up in the morning, and she would get better. But she didn't get better; she got worse, and before we can get her to the doctors, because they said she would be okay the next day. We went by what they said, and through that, she didn't make it through the night, and I didn't know she had she had passed because she had told me, just, baby, just lay down here, by me. So I sat down by the sofa near her head, and I dozed off. And when I woke up about um, 3:30, 4 o'clock, my wife had passed. I felt her; she was cold. She had passed while I was sleeping, and she had insisted that I get, a little rest, a few hours of sleep. But while I was sleeping, she was passing. The head nurse was a wife of mine, the wife of one of my schoolmates, and I felt very, very angry with her. And at that moment, I don't know what I would have done to her if she was near me. I learned later her name, and I knew Kathy, but you know, and I was angry with her and the doctor that took the X-ray, and the feeling at that time was, um, I don't know what I would have done to them if they were near me or close, um, but my concern at this point in time now was to um, get the information that I needed in order to find that there was neglect. The other thing was to even with her passing, it was now to get her the best um, um, service at the funeral home and get my kids in a state where they could understand that mom would no longer be with them. She had passed. For the first, we got her funeralized, and with that, my father couldn't make it to New York because he was sick. So we got in contact with a funeral service in Haines City, Florida, and we shipped her to talk with the funeral director there. And he had remembered her because there were many days he was down, and she would come along and pick his spirits up, and she always joked with him and kept his spirit going. So he had promised me that he would drive to the airport in Tampa and pick her up personally, and he would do her service and not charge us anything because she was a spirit lifter for him, and because of that he provided free service, and he did that. But it's hard to take something like this because she was not only in my mind one of the best singers that you would ever want to hear, and she sang with the Whitney Phipps groups out of Florida. But in seeing that, something, a piece of me and my family was gone. To me, it was something that was trying to understand, and every time there was a knock at the door, you would think that, in my mind, I would think that, boy, that's her. For the first year, it was very difficult for me, and I thought going through that first year that she was going to walk in any minute, and and I went through that. But for the next 13 years, it was very difficult to love another lady or even time with another female, because it was a cog that's taken out of my life that none of those could fill, because I loved her hard, and no one could match her, and what I had for her was hard love, and no one matched that love that I had for her. No one could take her place for those 14 years, and it was tough. It was tough.
As I grew up, I kind of had a hard time with that because at that time, I needed my mom. You know, being a female growing up, you need your mom to teach you certain things that a mother would teach you, but I didn't have that. So I was relying on like my sisters and stuff to teach me certain things, but they also had their lives too. I couldn't just push my way in and, hey, teach me all this stuff now. Like, I need you to teach me all this stuff. I would call them if I had any questions. I would call and ask. But there were some times where I got into that mode where I was just like, I don't want to ask them. I want my mom. I just want to be able to just talk to her. I just want my mom. Like, I don't want to talk to my sisters. I don't want to ask my sisters for advice. I don't want to do that. That's not what I want to do. I want my mom. It was really hard for me to get over that, and everybody was like, kind of on me about, Asia, you gotta get past it. And, she's not just your mom, but I mean, sometimes people don't understand what you're going through if they haven't experienced it themselves. Um, it was difficult for me because I don't have my mom. And I found like growing up that going through elementary school where they had the mother and daughter teas and stuff like that, and I didn't have my mom, and I had to like get filled in with a teacher. I do remember one teacher. I think her name was Mrs. Reed. I remember we had a mother daughter tea, or it was kind of like a Thanksgiving type thing, and I remember she was there with me, and my dad, at the time he worked at Xerox, so he couldn't be there, and I remember he dropped off apple juice, apple cider, cause yeah, we're from New York, and I remember him going off to work, but I was wishing that he was there, but I knew he had to work and he couldn't be there, but Mrs. Reed was there with me, and I really did appreciate that, and I remembered her for that, and she knew my mom also, so it kind of, it helped me deal with that part of it, but I had times where I was jealous of other kids because they had their mom and I didn't, and I got angry a lot because I felt like it wasn't fair because I wanted my mom, and I couldn't have her, but everybody else had their mom and they could go and talk to her and spend time with her and stuff like that, but I couldn't do it. So, I learned with me going through that stage where I didn't want to ask my sisters, I learned a lot of things. I taught myself a lot of things about how to take care of myself, and all I can say is that I just had to come to an understanding that certain things happen for a reason, and it made me stronger. And it was a really hard time. That's all I could say.
Yep. And understanding that you are a parent, I always interacted with my mother more so than my father. Um, and a lot of times I want to talk to him about things, he would send me to my mother. And my mother passed, but I was older than my kids. And I understood that there was a big gap in my life because now I don't have that person to talk to. But understanding how I felt, I could deal with my kids in a manner, in a manner that I had to understand that I was now mom and dad, and going to the activities and trying to be with them as much as I possibly could. We began to get the labor of Mr. Mom. And I was a type of parent who was a fuss box when something didn't go right in school with my kids. And now I know that I had to have the sensitivity that they needed in their little young lives. Um, so I called in my oldest daughter and had her stay with me to try to balance that out. But in all that, my understanding was that dads just don't have the sensitivity that mothers have. There's a special signal, or there's a special um, beaker that goes off that mothers understood. As a dad, it was very difficult to understand some of their situations or some of their little problems. But in all that, you become um, more sensitized to the girls, especially the boys. Well, they tough a lot of things out and they don't talk about them because they feel that that's my dad. I don't want my dad to know. But my daughters um, attached themselves, or she attached herself to me, so that I could talk with her about anything. And I made sure that we discussed any and everything, because now I was the focus of their lives, and they were the focus of my life. And I wanted them to have the best upbringing that they could have. Even though mom was gone, we tried to fill in some of the gaps. Couldn't fill them all in because I wasn't female. So I didn't understand all of their problems, but I understood some. Those that I understood, I tried to answer to those. I tried to deal with them and deal with their situations and circumstances at times. But I knew I just didn't have the female radar. So uh, as a man, it was very difficult. But understanding that if I spent too much time with her, um, she would become daddy's girl, which she is. Um, but I appreciate that because she grew close, and we grew close to one another, and we look out for one another. And uh, going through this missing person in our life was a difficult pathway, because now you run into people who knew her and knew her standards and everything, and you would think that those people at some time, especially females, you would think that those who knew her would